Today's short sermon is going to be somewhat on point, given my current illness. We're going to be talking about the human body one last time today, and today I really want to focus on what happens when things go wrong. Think about it this way: for our bodies to work, we need to eat and drink, and when we eat and we drink, our body circulates that through the rest of the body so that it gets all the nourishments that we need. When we breathe, we get the oxygen coming into our body and we expel the carbon dioxide that, if we get too much, is actually hurtful to us. Then, of course, we have the nervous system, which I had problems with about a year and a half ago. Uh, when something goes wrong with the nervous system, it can really change the way you have to do things in your life. And if things go wrong and continue to go wrong, some of those processes that fail can end up hurting you severely, causing starvation, paralysis, or even death. When things go wrong in the church, when something fails in the body of the church, we too can have, we have to learn to prune what has died for it. Some of the processes that happen in our body, a lot of them are automatic. It's not something that we consciously have to do. You don't sit there and think, okay, breathe in, breathe out. You don't have to do that. It just happens. It's a good thing, because I'm forgetful, and I'm sure you're forgetful too, and sometimes we might just forget to breathe. That could be a big problem. So it's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing that so many of these processes are just hardwired for our body to do without having really to think about it. But that's really not how your spiritual life goes. We need to be intentional in how we address and do things in our lives. In other words, you can't just put your spiritual life on autopilot and expect it to work. You can't just assume that you're going to get better at Scripture because you sat next to the Bible. No, you have to pick it up and read it. Your prayer life will only get better if you pray more. Your volunteering muscle only gets better when you volunteer more, and that means spending more time on that and less time doing other things. In order for us to be a better church as a whole, each of us has to be willing to be intentional about the choices we make and what they will lead to in the future. Jesus never intended for just one or two people to carry the entire responsibility of feeding and nourishing and discipling a congregation to a select few, other than, just a small group, not for a whole church. Now, we're the Wesleyan tradition. We love our small groups. It's a manageable way for us to have one or two leaders lead a small group of people. It doesn't work well at a congregation level. We all must continue to grow and become more mature in our faith so that we can again go out and teach others. And I want you to know there's biblical precedence for this. It's not me saying, oh, I'm sick and can't take care of you. It's biblical. But think of it more like this. If a pastor was in charge of helping feed everyone in the congregation all at the same time, it would be kind of absurd. Think of it like this. Okay, you're in a maternity ward and there's 60 babies all crying that need to get fed, and there's one nurse there to feed them all. That person could feed one or two at a time, but it's going to take forever, and quite frankly, a lot of those babies are going to fall through the cracks. It's not a sustainable system. It's unrealistic to put that expectation just on one person. So let's talk about Moses in the book of Exodus. I believe it's Exodus 18. Moses feels overwhelmed, as he should, because he's been in charge of leading an entire nation. Now, It's difficult to lead a small congregation. I can only assume it would be vastly overwhelming to lead an entire nation. But one of his friends helped had him think about it a little bit different way. His name was Jethro, and he suggested to him that he delegate some of those leadership responsibilities to trusted members so that they could create essentially their own version of a small group. Now, that could have been, 1,000 people here, 10,000 people there, until it kind of cycles down. But you get the point. The point is, Moses had this high level that he had to maintain in his leadership and couldn't get down to the little bitty details of everyone's spiritualness. So what did he do? He learned how to raise people up in the faith and delegate certain responsibilities to them so that they could do what he was doing. That's what Jesus says, do as I taught you to do. You can see the connection there. Jesus does this again. We'll say he mimics Moses's principle when he entrusts deeply in his 12 disciples. He shares his whole life with them. He teaches them all the things that they need to know to be good and faithful servants to God. He processes with them. He makes sure that they understand best that they can what they need to do to ensure that the kingdom of heaven is here on earth and a place that we go to in the future. Ministry manipulation, not individual overload, was the goal. In other words, we need to multiply our ministry capabilities through its members and not just put everything on one person for them to do. If we do that, that's a lot of reasons why some pastors get burnt out, because they try to do too much and they don't delegate well. But the first thing you have to do is understand your congregation. But now, when we unite as one, as I said last week, we're going to have difference of opinion. We're going to have different ways of looking at things. We're going to have different outlooks on where we are versus where we ought to be. And that goes for the church and in life. And I welcome those differences. I welcome that discussion. But a lot of that starts in the small groups. It's one of the reasons why I want to have this Lent study session with you, so that we can get together and continue to unify our church so that we can better know and understand one another. I know that there are people in this church that have been going for a long time that don't know people to sit a couple of pews over. They don't know them that well. Sure, they know their names, but do they know their kids' names? Do you know what's really going on in their life? Is it somebody that you can just pick up and call? What about our new members? Do you know all their names? And new members, do you know the names of the people in the church? Just the names. It's not as simple as it looks. It takes time and effort. In other words, you have to be intentional about building those lines of communication between yourself and those around you. And when you do that, and the other person is also doing that, you make a good and strong connection. When things are going great, fantastic. You get to work side by side with one another doing the Lord's work. And when something goes wrong, you can be there to help support them, to make sure that they get risen back up to where they were, if not better. The point is, we don't go about it alone. Not one person in the church can meet all the needs of everyone in the church. We need all of us to work together to form properly as the church. Otherwise, parts of the church end up dying off. We don't want to see that happen, and we definitely don't want to see an end to Mount Washington. Look, I love you guys. I miss being there with you. It's not part of my Sunday. It is the best part of my Sunday. Being with you guys, sharing with you, getting to know you better each and every week is the best part of my week. So let's open up. Let us speak in unity in those terms and in those words. And now let's show it by our deeds, by getting together and actually opening up, learning together, doing ministry alongside one another. It's something that we can do. It's something that we must do, because that is how we are going to continue to grow disciples within our church. And it's how we're going to continue to grow our church in numbers so that it will be fruitful not for the church's sake, but for the neighborhood around it that is counting on us to do well. Over the years, there have been many books written on how to grow churches. They come from different backgrounds, different denominations, different types of research, but they all kind of come to the same conclusion on 2 points. One is to keep people going to a church, it needs to have a good leadership structure. In other words, the pastor, the lay leadership, all those need to be doing good, doing the Christ-like work within the church. But that alone isn't enough to actually grow the church. To grow the church, it comes from individual connections made by people in the church. It's usually done through small groups, through things you can invite them to. So when we as pastors, when we talk about having unity within the church, having part of the church growing, to having you become mature members of the church, what we're saying is, as you continue to grow and be more mature in your faith, it is our job as Christians, as disciples, to go and make more disciples, to bring our faith to others, so that they too can experience what God has done for you for themselves. So today, as you head back out into the world, as I know you're about to do, take a moment, aside from Super Bowl Sunday, take a moment before the festivities get started and sit there and think about, at least for a couple of minutes, what can I do to make a stronger connection, not only with the person in the pew next to me, but to the person who ought to be in the pew next to me. Until then, until next week, I wish that you have a fantastic Sunday, and go Seattle.